Freezing decorated cookies can either save you a lot of time or completely ruin your designs if it's not done correctly. Whether you bought custom cookies and you want to save them for later, or you're a decorator trying to work ahead, here's how to freeze them safely. If you purchase decorated cookies and you want to freeze them for a later date, let's keep it simple. The goal is just to protect them from the air and the moisture. If your cookies are already heat sealed, which is ideal, you can just place them in an airtight container or freezer bag and store them in the freezer. If they're not individually bagged, make sure to put a small piece of parchment paper in between your cookies so they're not touching. You don't want to stack them if you can avoid it because the weight can crush the cookies on the bottom. One thing I would avoid is storing decorated cookies in the refrigerator. The humidity in the fridge can cause condensation, damaging the icing, and it can also dry out your cookies. When you're ready to use them, take the container out and let it come fully to room temperature before you open it. That step prevents condensation from forming directly on the icing. That's what causes colors to bleed or the surface to become sticky. If you're a decorator freezing your own cookies, there are a few extra steps that make a big difference. Before freezing your decorated cookies, the most important step is just making sure they're completely dry. Even if they look dry on the surface, the icing underneath can still be soft. I let mine dry at room temperature for at least 24 hours, and I do it in front of a small fan as an extra precaution. If you've used any luster dust or edible gold, edible paint on your cookies, lightly dust them with a small amount of cornstarch after they've dried. This helps absorb any surface moisture and protects the finish before freezing. Skipping this step can lead to smudges on the inside of your heat-sealed bags. Before placing cookies into containers, I do like to package them individually. You can use heat-sealed bags or adhesive treat bags, but there are important differences. The biggest being that adhesive bags don't always create a fully airtight seal, and that can allow moisture in, especially when you're freezing and thawing. Because of that, I prefer to use the heat sealer and double seal my cookies to make sure they're completely closed. If you do have the adhesive treat bags, you can still use them, just heat seal them and then trim off the adhesive portion afterwards. That way you still get a clean look and it's fully sealed. This helps protect the cookie and just looks really professional. Heat sealers are relatively cheap and they really do preserve the freshness of your cookies. I just can't recommend heat sealing enough. So once your cookies are fully dried and packaged, you want to store them in an airtight container. And instead of stacking them on top of each other flat, you want to tip them up on their end and store them vertically. This helps prevent pressure on the designs and keeps the details from getting crushed. Trust me, I crushed plenty of cookies before I learned this. You want to keep them close together so they don't shift, but not put them in so tight that anything's going to be damaged. And using the right container here makes a big difference in how well they hold up. I'll link the exact container and supplies I use to freeze cookies down in the description. Once everything's packed and sealed into the container, you can just put it into the freezer. Decorated cookies freeze very well when they're stored this way, and in my experience, they can stay fresh with no real noticeable change in flavor or texture for about 2 months. When you're ready to take your cookies out, you want to leave them in the container and leave it completely sealed. Everything's going to come back to room temperature before you open it. I usually just set mine on the counter overnight, but depending on the size of the container, it's often ready within about 5 or 6 hours. This is going to allow the condensation to form on the outside of the container instead of on the cookies or in their packaging. So a few things to avoid: freezing cookies before they're fully dry, opening the container too early, using packaging that isn't airtight, stacking cookies on top of one another, storing cookies in the refrigerator, opening the container before it's room temperature. Freezing decorated cookies can be a really helpful way to work ahead or to extend the life of your custom cookie order, but only when it's done correctly. I made a free printable guide for freezing cookie dough, baked cookies, and even royal icing, and I'll leave the link in the description. As always, I hope something in this video inspires you, and thanks for joining me.